welcome into a very nice episode of Flag for Discussion. It's episode 69 for Monday, March 2nd. My name is Farbod Merkazi. Here as always, you didn't like that? Here's always with Jace Hatfield.
I liked it. I can't condone it, but I can smile and laugh.
Well, if you can't condone it, I hope you'll be able to condone our show process and our show topics today. We got a fun show planned for everybody. It's the beginning of March, but that means a lot for us. And Jace, I know we have topics planned. I also have 6 topics on my phone ready for us to bring up at any point. I don't know if I'm going to do them back to back to back because we got to talk college football at some point. But on the college football front, the playoff itself has been everywhere. We got to talk a little bit about the playoff because I know people at home are probably going to be rolling their eyes a little bit, saying these guys, all they do is shit on the playoff. All these guys are always negative about the playoff. Well, we're going to be positive today. We're going to talk about who could be in the playoff. Who we're going to be talking about who, if you don't like this team, who could not be in the playoff next year. It's just a fun exercise with like some info, but not a ton, about how the playoff itself is going to work if we keep it the same for the next several years. Who are the best wide receiver rooms in the country? Rankings be damned. We don't love rankings, but we found one on CBS that feels like a really good overview on who will have the best wide receiver room next year and how does that contribute to their winning. And then finally, the NCAA is finally discussing some transfer portal and some schedule, like college football calendar violations and updates. We're going to dive into some of that. A lot of it is legal jargon that, like, I don't know how much we wanted to dive into and be boring, but there's a good amount to do. Jace, how we doing? It's Monday, March 2nd. It's the first day of March. Not first day, first podcast of March. First podcast of March.
I'm feeling good. In a month from now, we'll be talking about spring games. And then once that conversation finishes up, we go full pedal to the metal, each other's bachelor parties, other bachelor parties, each other's weddings, other weddings. And then it's college football time. No, I'm feeling good. I feel like March is kind of the turn. The weather's getting nice here in Chicago finally, which means I can start the golf season soon. Things are looking up.
So you accidentally dove right into one of my 6 phone topics for you. First of all, what does March 2nd mean to you and to me? I'll give you a couple guesses.
Was this the date when we recorded our first actual, like, not like, was this when we did the first podcast?
No, it ain't that deep.
Or, you know what I mean? Okay. Oh, it ain't
that deep.
What is March 2nd? March 2nd.
It's 1 month away from you and I being in an undisclosed location with several beers in our hands on my bachelor party.
We might have to do a 2 a.m. bachelor pod. See what happens after 19 IPAs and 36 holes of golf.
You know what? I'm down. That might be the only thing we can do if we do 36 holes of golf. And then, so the tough part of pre-recording a podcast, for obviously everyone knows it's not technically March 2nd as you and I are recording right now, but what does today, February 26th, signify to you and I? We are 2 months away from returning home hungover as shit from your bachelor party at an undisclosed location. It's the day after.
All right.
Yeah.
So the bachelor parties are piling up for us, which is a good thing. They're fun. And our undisclosed locations are great.
Yes. Oh my God. I'm so excited. I've already asked you this, but if any of Jace's groomsmen are listening, this is more of a request for my fiance than me. I get married like 2 weeks later. Can we not give me like a black eye or a broken leg or something? We can have fun, but keep me.
We're going to get you in a fight with a grizzly bear. I'm going to make you go fight one. I'll send Morgan a video of you fighting. I got to stop doxing our ladies.
I'm just glad that it's just you.
Yeah, it's just
I'm
like 0 for 3.
3 straight podcasts. No, we'll get into college football in a second. Yeah, today means a lot, kind of, for the show and for our next couple months. We're gonna have a lot of fun doing it, but we're also gonna be hopefully somewhat safe because we have a big couple month plan, and hopefully we'll bring Flag for Discussion alongside for that. If we don't, make sure you're following us on YouTube at Flag for Discussion, spelled out, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts, at Flag for Discussion, spelled out. We're also on Twitter at F4Discussion and TikTok at Flag4Discussion. Jace, we have one of the 6 phone topics down. Do you want to go into a college football topic or another phone topic?
Let's do one more phone topic. I like the energy we have going so far.
All right. So you're a college basketball fan. UConn just beat St. John's yesterday. And St. John's scored a basket in the second half with like 17-18 remaining in the second half. They went on to not score a basket for the rest of the damn game. How do you quantify that in college football? Like, define this in college football terms. Is that a quarterback not completing a pass for an entire second half? Like, it's not that UConn didn't do anything. They didn't score a basket. And not UConn, St. John's.
Holy cow. I want to go look at this now.
Yeah.
That's the Dan Hurley, like, psychopath mentality on defense that's working. Yeah, no, that's like not getting a first down for the entire second half. I'm just pulling this up because I'm curious.
But that's a good team not getting
horrible.
a first down. So Rick Pitino, I mean, that's definitely Rick Pitino's worst loss ever.
That's like how Oregon started the playoff game against Indiana.
Yeah.
I hate to bring it up, but that's what that reminds me of. That's like throwing up pick 6 on the first play of a semifinal playoff game. Wow, that is crazy. Yeah. 15 minutes without a bucket. That's horrible.
They lost by 32 in that game. Has nothing to do with college football, but it was something nuts that, like, I don't know if we'll ever see that again. I don't know if we'll ever see a team just go the entire second half. I know they scored in the second half, the entire second half from scoring a bucket. This is a college football show, but college hoops is still our domain. We can talk some college hoops on here. I know you love yourself some college hoops. I work in college hoops.
Yeah, you're sporting some college hoops gear at the moment. I was watching college hoops. Shout out the Spartans. Sorry for my Purdue friends that listen. I was watching that game right before we hopped on here.
Yes.
Two teams, speaking of the college football playoff, 2 teams that won't be in it. No offense.
No,
there could be some new teams in 2026. I don't think the Spartans or the Boilermakers are going to be 2 of them.
Hey, man, they can dream, right? Pat Fitzgerald, they hired somebody, right? He was good sometimes at Northwestern. All right, moving on to more college football. This is a topic I thought was really interesting, Jace. So basically, I went through the 2024 playoff and the 2025 playoff. And yes, there were some differences in how teams were seeded. And more importantly, because of Miami not being great for a little bit, being awesome, forcing their way in, because of Notre Dame falling out, this year's playoff was a little different. Duke won the ACC, so they didn't have to put the ACC champ in there because they went like 7-5. So we got 2 group of 5 teams in this year. But the 2024 college football playoff was Oregon, Georgia, Boise State, ASU, Texas, Penn State, Notre Dame, Ohio State, Tennessee, Indiana, SMU, and Clemson. You already know the answer, but I want to ask everybody at home, how many teams from the 2024 playoff, if we asked you this in August before the season started, would make the playoff again in 2025? I think everyone would have said probably 7 to 9 of them, right? I would also ask you, like, how many of those teams did make it? Right now, if you look at it from 2024 to 2025, only 4 teams are repeat college football playoff competitors. We have Indiana. Obviously, they just won the national title. Ohio State won the national title last year. Georgia and Oregon. That means out of the 12 spots, 4 came back, 8 were new. Oh, I just thought this was a interesting conversation topic on its own, but we can get into the questions in a second. What do you think about like that dynamic? Was it just because we have a ton of teams in college football? Like in the NFL, there's like I think about 7-ish new. There's a certain amount of playoff teams that are repeatedly new. But overall, like there's your regulars. Where are we on this, do you think?
Yeah, I think we're going to be between like 4 and 8 repeats every year, probably leaning like 5 to 6 would be probably most common. I think like Clemson, Penn State, Notre Dame, Texas, all were teams that I think, myself included, a lot of people thought would make it again. So I think we'll be right around there. I do think with like the big conferences we have now and how good the Big Ten and the SEC have gotten, I almost think we're going to have the same, each conference will have like 4 to 6 teams that every year, like 3 of them will make it. And a team like next year, Penn State might be right back in it. Like, I think you might have a year where Oregon has a quarterback that rotates over, or like they lose the quarterback. They kind of have a tough schedule in the Big Ten. You know, you play at Ohio State, at Indiana, at USC, things like that. And you might miss a year, but they're going to be right back. So I think we'll have like this rotating cycle of 6 SEC teams, 5 Big Ten teams, and every year like 2 to 3 in each conference will make it for sure, and they'll cycle based on schedule. And then I think we'll probably have a rotating 4 to 8 that sit there at the bottom every year that get a really good schedule. You have a good transfer portal class, and boom, here you are. Now you're kind of back in the playoff, like Texas Tech this past year. Good quarterback play, got a really good roster, had a very favorable schedule, and they were able to make a playoff. So I think it's a good parity. I think it's a good mix. Is that coaches that are working to build sustainable dynasties, I think will see success in terms of making the playoff. I also think programs, like we always talk about window programs on the show. There's no better time to be a window program than in a 12-team playoff. There's going to be like Louisville, I always say Louisville, and I know it's wrong. In 2026, they have a very favorable schedule, and they had a good transfer portal class. That's a team where I don't think we're going to see them in the playoff often, but I do see a world where good portal class schedule comes out favorable, and boom, here you are competing in a playoff. So I think we'll get a healthy amount of parity year in, year out. I know I'm not a huge fan of the 12-team playoff, but a good thing about it is I think you get the proper mix of this team's a dynasty and they deserve a chance each year and they're going to make it. And on the flip side, you get some parity that makes it a little bit more fun for fans. I think it's even fun for probably athletes as well. It gives you more options to compete at the highest level.
Who tells you you're wrong about Louisville?
I've always heard people be like, it's Louisville. And I'm like, okay, I'm not saying it like that.
I think that's a dialect thing. I think you can say Louisville. I say Louisville. Don't fuck them. Don't let them bother you. You're your own person.
I think everyone outside of like Kentucky probably calls it Louisville, and then Kentucky's like Louisville.
Yeah, well, sure. Yeah,
correct me if I'm wrong. If you're from Kentucky, let me know.
Okay, I agree with you. I think there's parts of this that are just easily explained by it's raised the middle class of college football. Like, you can't tell me that Iowa State, after Jimmy Rogers gets them up, is going to be a regular college football playoff contender. But if you told me as a window program they have more of an opportunity at that window, sure, I'll buy that. It's raised that middle class, but it also hasn't fully brought, if you want to keep on with this analogy, the 1%ers down, right? So the top of the top that will be probably regulars will likely be in the playoff regularly. But I think the other aspect that we haven't talked about or that we haven't considered yet is the teams like Texas. Because you have your middle class, you have the group of 5, and you have the 1%. And Texas, most of the time, is going to be your 1%er. But what happens if they do what they did this past year? They go from a 5th-year, 4th-year Quinn Ewers quarterback to a first-year starting Arch Manning. And then they have some injuries at running back. Some things don't work out. And because of that, they are still a very good team, but they're a volatile team that in a tough conference forces them to just out of the top 12, forces them just out of the playoff. I think that's where the 12-team playoff really comes in to bite a little bit, because when in the 14 playoff, everyone was undefeated or one loss, and they were like the best of the best. In the 12-team playoff, unless you were TCU or Cincinnati, in the 12-team playoff, is going to be probably like that, but there's a lot of differences.
Yeah, a team like Texas, if you think about it, they had almost as bad of a year as they could have really imagined last season in terms of what could have gone wrong, went wrong. Early season, kind of an ugly loss to Ohio State, just had no offense. Had some ugly wins early in the season where they were beating bad teams by not a lot, and they didn't look good doing it. Had some more tough losses. And despite having, like I said, in terms of output, they didn't look good on the field. The win-losses weren't great. The stats weren't great. and they just missed the playoff. So I think for the top 1%, you're really only going to miss the playoff on those years where you have a big roster turnover, or a couple of games really don't go your way and you have some injuries that don't go your way, and all this is going to crumble and you're just going to miss out. So if you're living at the top, I think it's probably got to be a very comfortable seat. It's going to take the worst of the worst to bring you down, and odds are Texas is right back into the playoff conversation and in the playoff in 2026. Well, yeah,
I think Texas is almost like a bad example. It's almost the perfect example, but almost like a bad example, because it's like, if you're trying to pick the NFL teams right now next year that are going to be new playoff contenders, how much of a cop-out does it feel to say the Chiefs, right? Like, it feels like a cop-out to say the Chiefs, but they didn't make the playoffs this year, so they technically count. Texas feels like a cop-out for us next year, because if you're looking at the playoff again for next year, for this past year, Texas Tech should be good again with Brennan Sorsby. Ole Miss just got Trinidad back. They should be good against. Their biggest loss on the offensive side was like Casey Concepcion. That's a huge loss, but they should be right back in it again. Oklahoma's returning John Mateer and a really good defense again. They should be right back in it. Alabama, some questions. We'll see how they come in for next year. Miami, some questions, but they have a pretty good wide receiver room. Darian Mesa coming in. Mario always recruits well. They should be good again. And then Tulane, JMU will. I don't know about the group of five, but then you're also talking about the Notre Dames of the world who didn't make the playoff. You're talking about the Texases of the world. You're talking about a team that might be trying to make a jump this year in like Louisville, like you mentioned, or Louisville. But are there, before we get to minor predictions, is there going to be a team that goes like 8 years straight of making the playoffs?
Good question. If it expands, for sure. If it stays at 12, if it expands, for sure. If it stays at 12, I would say I think I'm thinking of
like Ohio State.
I was gonna say Ohio State's kind of the team I'm thinking of here. I don't really remember a time in my life where they were ever like bad enough to not be considered like a serious contender. And they've definitely in our lifetime had 12-year stretches where they were probably a top 12 team 12 years straight. So I think it's possible. I think there's probably only a couple of teams who can achieve that. I don't think it's possible in the SEC. I think there's just a lot of good teams at the top. So I think they're going to beat each other up year after year. I think the Big Ten has really good teams at the top, but I do think the weakness of the bottom of the Big Ten helps someone maybe like Ohio State, right? I think it's a lot more likely to go lose in Starksville than it is to lose in West Lafayette. So
you can call it what it is.
Ohio State is probably the only one.
Yeah, no, I mean, you can call it what it is. The SEC probably collectively is like, when you're going through the meat of your conference, the harder schedule. But the Big Ten, you might play better teams on any given year in Oregon or Ohio State, USC some years, Indiana, Michigan. But you could also luck out with like a schedule Indiana had last year, and you're not playing any of the big boys. You don't take a loss. Or if you are playing a big boy, like Oregon had Penn State this year in Indiana. They lost to Indiana. They beat Penn State. They actually ruined Penn State. Theoretically, if Oregon had an SEC, I hate doing this, not an SEC schedule, but if they had like not a Purdue on their schedule, but had more of, like you said, a Mississippi State, they could have been in a little bit more trouble. I mean, you're right. That probably won't happen or come from the Big Ten if it happens.
Yeah, honestly, I think Ohio State is kind of the one team that could make it happen. Notre Dame could slip into that conversation, but it'll be interesting to see how people handle them, just schedule-wise and everything moving forward. But yeah, Ohio State's probably the team I envision. I think it's going to be too hard in the SEC. And then Big 12 and the ACC, you would think would be good conferences, because if you could become the top dog in that, you would say, oh, how can you not? But sometimes I think being such a top dog, like let's say Miami wins the ACC, runs all over the ACC next year, kills everybody, makes the playoff. 2027, kills everybody, makes the playoff. I think if you are so dominant in your conference, there's just, in today's modern era of college football, with a big target on your back, any team is just going to start, everyone's going to just arms race to beat you. And I do think it's hard to win a conference when you are the top dog, not something like the Big Ten, where like people are certain in the Big Ten, some people care more about Oregon, some people care more about beating Michigan, some people care more about beating Ohio State. And you can only circle so many games to like, all right, we can't give 150% effort 5 times this season. Where in the ACC, if everyone's all right and Miami's the top dog, Miami is the one circle team for everybody. And at that point, I do think it would get tough. So yeah, I think it's possible. This is a long roundabout way of me saying I think it's possible in the expanded conference universe or playoff universe. It's very possible, but I do think it's a very select few teams that can make it happen.
It's interesting what you said about not the small teams, but the smaller conferences, because I think you and I know from experience, from I'd say 2018 to Mario Cristobal and then first year of Dan Lanning, Oregon was every team in the Pac-12 Super Bowl. Utah, eventually, once they became really good, they became like, okay, no, they're actual rivals, but they were a fun rival. But like, you go down to Arizona State, they're putting everything in to give Oregon a tough time. That's like you said, it's like when you are the leader of a weaker performing conference, all of a sudden you're going to get every team's best shot. And that might hurt you some years. The other thing about the playoff that I was wondering about, like this trend of if we have just 4 teams next year, you and I have spent a lot of time talking about like there's teams like Oregon, like Alabama, like Ohio State that can't afford to miss the playoff. Like that's why they're not developing their own from home, like from the ground up quarterbacks as much anymore. They're going to go out and buy the best transfer portal quarterback. There's an argument to be made, like even though that's not possible. Like there's just so much parity, so many teams in college football, so much money that so many programs have that it might just be hard to make the playoff every year. Where like you miss out on a kid. He ended up going to Texas Tech or Purdue or whatnot, and maybe that team's not even a playoff team. But like, how on that note, like how difficult do you think it would be if you're Lincoln Riley this year? You're expected to be good. You paid a lot to bring back your class. You just paid a lot for the number 1 class in the country. You're expecting year 5 now, whatever they're in, year 5. Like Lincoln asked his fans to treat his 3rd year as his 1st year because he realized some of the mistakes he'd made in practices and in recruiting. They brought in a lot more defensive personnel, defensive coaches. We're in year 5 now. He's got a senior quarterback. He's got senior talent all over. If they don't make the playoffs this year, do USC boosters care how much money's left on Lincoln's contract?
I think if they don't make the playoff this year, I do think Lincoln could be on the outs because last year was kind of the year where Maava was going to be taking the big next step, and you had you had the insane wide receiver room. This season is interesting because, as you mentioned, their defense will be the best it's probably been personnel-wise since Lincoln Riley has taken over USC. But I also think they lost a little bit on the offensive side of the ball that people are overlooking, and they're going to be relying a lot on a lot of freshmen to play a lot of minutes all over the field for them. And then if any injuries occur at USC, the freshmen are going to have to be the ones to step up. And it was the number 1 recruiting class in the country. There's a lot of really good freshmen on this team, but it's a lot of pressure to put on a team that's going to require a lot of minutes out of freshmen to say, hey, we need to make the playoff this season. And 2 of our offensive linemen are probably going to have to be from this freshman group. Our starting tight end is going to have to be a freshman. We're probably going to need a freshman wide receiver to step up. We're probably going to need a freshman running back to step up. Not necessarily to be starters, but to be contributing players on this team. And depending on, injuries are a part of football. Obviously, you'd never wish that, but they happen. And if any injuries happen to this good defense that they've built, the good starting 11, the guys right after that starting 11 are all going to be young and experienced players. So they have an interesting roster. They have, they're kind of doing when you play a dynasty mode in a video game or a franchise mode in a professional game, and you have the world's best starters, and then every bench player is like a rookie or a freshman because you don't really want to deal with the intermediates in a video game. That's kind of how USC's roster looks to me. And it's a great roster on paper, but it is a risky one to say, I know you're 18. I know you just got here, but you might have to play heavy minutes on a team that's going to make the playoff. And it's doable. We've seen young teams make playoffs. Yeah. We've seen young teams succeed. But I do think for a team like USC, it is going to be a big step. They're a team that, even though they don't usually win all the big games, they don't tend to make playoffs and win Pac-12 championships often and things like that. They haven't competed for a Big Ten championship. Despite not being kind of a top dog, they still get, to their detriment, treated like a top dog by other teams. And that's something that I always think kind of bodes against that. Like, no one forgets about USC the way that maybe people, like, if people could forget about Wisconsin next year, and Wisconsin could then kind of use that under, people are overlooking them, and then they could have a big year. No one's overlooking USC. Even if they're not good, people want to beat them. And that's just a tough
It
hill
means
to
something to
overcome.
beat them. I mean, that
Absolutely.
brand still exists. Like, even if it was
Mhm.
20 years ago, beating Southern California, especially, you know more about this than I would, obviously. But hearing coaches talk about it is like, Coach whatever at Purdue wanted to be USC bad because it's November, it's snowing, it's 24 degrees in Purdue and Indiana, and they go out to play USC in 78 and sunny. Like, they're pissed off, and it's not just the brand. Like, there's many reasons some programs are just jealous, and they're like, it's almost out of anger. It's like, how are you not winning
Yeah.
here?
Absolutely. There's an anger, there's an edge of like, this West Coast warm Southern California school is coming into my Midwest town. Like, frick them, we're going to beat their ass. Like, I think there is a little bit of that like mentality of, it's college football, right? Like, a lot of East Coasters do not like the West Coast teams. And so when you are a Southern California in the Big Ten, you really, like, of the West Coast cities that catch a lot of heat from people that have never visited the West Coast, LA is by far the city that the most people have very diehard, strong, angry opinions on that have never been there. And that does translate, when they do go play, exactly. If they go play Purdue, Rutgers, Minnesota, whoever in the Michigan State, whoever they play in the Big Ten, there is going to be that natural anger among players and coaches of like, we can't let these SoCal boys come in here and
Yeah.
beat us. They wouldn't even use the term SoCal, I guess. That's a West Coast term. But they would have that mentality. So I do think this is a long roundabout here. Yes, USC, I think, does need to make the playoff if Lincoln Riley is going to maintain a future at USC. My prediction, if they do or not, is going to depend on the schedule. I know they got the Ducks again. I know they have Ohio State, and I know they have Indiana. I think they go 0 for 3 in those games. So I'm gonna say no, they do not make it, and we find Lincoln Riley on the hot seat.
I would think I'll take it. I would think he wouldn't be fired unless it was like a disaster of a season. I would assume next year's performance is much more important in keeping the recruiting class he had around and not transferring out than it is to Lincoln's job. I think it's like the following year, if they don't make the playoff or show real like danger to other Big Ten powers, then they're in trouble. But I know we've been going on this for a while, but I think we just stay on it for a sec because I think it's a good combo. All right, let's go down the list. Indiana, this year, number 1 seed made the national title. Will they make the playoff next year? And I know you have to go through the schedules. Let's just take it off of base value.
I'll go no schedule. I'll say yes to Indiana. I like Josh Hoover. I like Nick Marsh. Charlie Becker's back. I think this is a good team. And it's Kurt Signetti. He retained pretty much his entire staff. I think there's no reason for me to believe Indiana doesn't continue what they've done.
Ohio State, in or out of the playoff? So Ohio State, I think, is the answer to which team will make the playoff like 8 years in a row, right? Because you could convince me that Georgia has its 2-loss season at some point. You could convince me that Alabama, they didn't make it last year, but I think Ohio State, if any team's going to make it like 8-10 years in a row in this format, not that we're going to have this format for 10 more years, it would be Ohio State. Georgia.
Ooh, Georgia. I'm very much on the fence with this one. This is a schedule dependent one. Does Gunnar Stockton take that next step? Does he not? Where's Kirby? I'll say no to Georgia. I think there's going to be a surprise there eventually.
Texas Tech.
I'm going to say no.
I like that too. I think the Big 12, people see it as like, oh, they should be able to roll through it, and I agree. Are they at the same level as they were last year? Or is losing David Bailey and some of the guys they've lost going to bring them a little closer to that BYU edge? And BYU's rising. And maybe BYU becomes the one Big 12 team. Number 5, Oregon. Will they make the playoff?
Yes, I think they'll make the playoff again.
All right, so we have 3 entrants from this year's playoff into next year's, 2 exits. Let's see if we can keep this going. Ole Miss.
I'll say yes. I think another year of Trinidad and Lacey, that's a pretty good duo to have back there again.
A&M.
I'll say yes. I love their wide receiver room. We'll talk a little bit more about that here shortly.
Yeah.
But another year of Marcel. And Marcel Reed is young. A lot. I think he kind of got overlooked. There were so many fun quarterbacks, especially in the playoff, and they lost early, so we didn't really get to talk a lot about Marcel Reed. He's a great young quarterback. There's a big chance that he is in New York for the Heisman finalist next season.
Yeah, I like that. Oklahoma.
I'm gonna say no. I just don't trust John Mateer. Again, we'll talk about their wide receiver room here in a minute. I just don't know if they have the weapons to help him out that he might need to win in the SEC.
Alabama.
This is tough. This is another team that I think it comes down to the schedule for me. I'm gonna say no. I think I'm curious. They lost Horton. They're gonna have new quarterback for next season. We'll see how things go. I'm gonna say no for them though.
It is time to have a serious conversation. If they miss the playoff, Kalen might be fired. At post Saban, missing the playoff 2 out of 3 years, getting blown out in the Rose Bowl in the 1 year you made the playoff. Like, you and I both think Kalen DeBoer is a great coach, but if they miss the playoff this year, man, he might be let go.
Yeah, there's a real chance that there's a really good coaching vacancy in terms of there's a world where Lincoln Riley is viable and Kalen DeBoer is a free agent essentially next season, which would be very fascinating to see. So there could be some hot seats next season.
And then Miami. I'm not going to do the group of 5 stuff. Miami.
I'll say yes to Miami. I think that's a good football team. Their trenches are going to be good. They're going to have a good secondary, a much better secondary, and then that's a really good wide receiver room. Malachi Toney is also just a game changer.
So you have 6 teams returning to the playoff next year. That is 2 more than returned to the playoff this year from the previous. Feels like this is closer to the mean. Maybe you could argue A&M or Ole Miss are out, but they are returning their quarterbacks. They're returning a lot of production that made them playoff teams last year. So I guess you can't necessarily argue whatnot. And this is obviously not counting for schedule, not counting for injury, not counting for all the small stuff that turn into big stuff. But it's interesting looking at this because this is just how we assume it. And I'm so interested to see what the playoff looks like in 10 months because I want to see how close we are to that, how close you are to predicting teams because you have 6 teams, but we considered LSU, Lane Kiffin, a big investment into the team this year. They should be good. What about Notre Dame, Texas? Who else? Tennessee, USC. Is Penn State going to be good? There's a lot of teams that could shut us up about what we think Ole Miss is going to be, what we think Oregon's going to be, what we think even Indiana's going to be. If USC takes a jump, if Penn State comes out of nowhere, I mean, all of a sudden we could have another 4-team playoff instead.
Yeah, there's 3 teams that I feel good about: Indiana, Ohio State, Oregon. I think the other Big Ten, I still think Michigan's going to have some growing pains with everything that's transpired there. And they still just don't have a lot of that top end talent that Indiana, Ohio State, and Oregon do. Penn State, similarly, I think there's too much change. They could still be a really good team. I feel good about my 3 Big Ten teams. US, like you said, you make a good point. USC could push for that. Penn State, Michigan, Washington, those are schools that could push them out, but I just don't think that they will. The SEC is, I think, year in, year out going to be the hardest to pick and predict. I'm taking the safe route, going with Ole Miss and A&M. But yeah, Texas easily. I also took out Georgia and Alabama.
I was going to say, I don't know if that's a safe route.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, that's a good. 6 years ago, if I said Georgia, Bama, give me Ole Miss and A&M, you would spit in my face and call me an idiot.
Well, I wouldn't. I'm a good guy.
This time, yeah, some people would. This time, Mike Bobo, Nomo, give me Ole Miss, give me A&M, and then we'll see about Kalen DeBoer. But yeah, I feel like it's hilarious because I feel good about my list of 6. Clip this. We'll come back in 10 months, and I'll eat my words when 5 of these teams didn't make the playoff.
We need to actually create a sheet of things we clip and coming back to it, just because it would just be so fascinating to see how we thought about things. But it also might be kind of embarrassing because how far did you and I think Clemson was going to go?
National championship game.
Yeah. All right. Let's get into the wide receiver conversation. You obviously looked at this a lot, so I want you to take the lead on this.
I
But
like this.
CBS Sports revealed their top 10 wide receiver rooms for 2026. Go down the list, but also tell me what you think on it.
Yeah, so Brad Crawford had a great list that came out when you're listening this past week. The top 10 wide receiver rooms for 2026, as Farbode mentioned. It was fun to look at for a few reasons. One, obviously, in today's college football, passing heavy, having really good wide receivers we saw with Indiana is key to winning a national championship. Based on where NIL money is going, it seems like teams have recognized wide receivers are in college football one of the best ways to get an edge over a team, because college corners are probably the weakest overall position group in college football. And on the flip side, college receivers can be some of the most dominant. So it's how you can create some of the best mismatches. And we talked about it all season with Indiana. How many times did they get themselves into third and long? And every single time they had three playmakers that seemed like they made every big play for them. That's because they had such good receivers and they were able to take advantage. Plus, there was a lot of big names that entered the portal this season. Cam Coleman, Nick Marsh, plus many others I'll talk about here. So it's kind of fun to see where they all landed. And I think in the heat of everything going on in college football, it's kind of nice to sit down for a second and actually stop talking about the hypotheticals and the schedule and the season and talk about some football. So I'll start us off here. So this is Brad Crawford's list, not Farbode and I's top 10. At number 1, he had Texas. They have Cam Coleman going to next year, transfer from Auburn. They bring back Ryan Wingo. He was kind of their go-to guy last year, young wide receiver, still developing, but he was a high recruit. And then they bring in Stanford transfer Emmett Mosley the 5th. Now, this was his number 1 room. I have a note on here that says, I love the top 2. I think Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo is an insane downfield threat combination. Emmett Mosley's a big wide receiver. We know Stanford always produces those. I really like the top 2, and I think Emmett Mosley's a very complimentary third. But after this, there's just not much production, nothing that gives you much solace in that they go more than 3 deep. And when you get into some of these other rooms, I don't know if this is my number 1. But like I said, just the duo of Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo, they stay healthy all season. There's only a few teams that have enough secondary to help that out and stop it. But at the same time, as we all know, injuries happen. If one of those guys goes down, I think it changes this team dramatically. The question for this team, which I'll ask you here, Farbode, is this enough of an upgrade from last season to make you feel confident with Arch's development that this is not only just a playoff team, but a national championship contending team?
I think it's no doubt. I think if you put Cam Coleman on Ohio State, and this is no disrespect to Jeremiah Smith, people would be talking about Cam Coleman the way they talk about Jeremiah Smith. And I don't think, I'm not saying either one of them is better than the other. I think the obvious fact of the matter right now is Jeremiah Smith's had the better career, obviously the more wins, everything. And Cam Coleman's been stuck with 15 quarterbacks at Auburn. But you put Cam Coleman, Ryan Wingo together. One of the reasons we don't love rankings in general is because they're just all over the place, right? But I like this list because it at least just reminds me who these teams have. And if you're telling me you have a 4th-year Arch Manning, yes, it's his 2nd year starting, his 4th year. So he's combining, and this might sound cliche and all the stuff that everyone's always said, but he's combining a childhood and lifetime of learning from his uncles and dad and grandpa, all about coverages, being a quarterback every day of his life. Basically, he's been immersed in that. But now he's entering year 4 of the Texas system, year 2 of starting. Man, as long as Sark comes out with a good plan and they're able to block for those receivers to get the ball, I think this has a chance to be pretty formidable. And I would almost make Texas, not because of Arch. I just feel like Texas is a playoff team, almost a lock.
Yeah, I think I'm there with you. They should take that step up, and you hope. We said this a lot about them last year. They really struggled to run the football last season. And part of that, there's a lot of reasons why that happens. It's a big equation. One of those higher level variables has to be when you don't have a super threatening passing game, allows teams to stack the box, allows safeties to creep down. Another year of Ryan Wingo, assuming he develops, assuming Arch develops, bring in Cam Coleman to the equation. that has to move safeties back, right? That has to make linebackers a little more hesitant. Those are the type of things that you hope for Texas. If you're a Texas fan, open up the run game. Those are the things that if you're a Texas fan, that's what you would like to see. We can't live in a world where we just play like Madden, where we just play 4 verticals and chuck it deep to one of those 2 every time. Now they are going to play teams that don't have the secondary, and in which case you absolutely can. You're going to score 80. However, when Texas plays those good SEC teams, and SEC teams always have really good DBs. If you play a team that has like a pro caliber safeties and a good corner or two, you're going to have to run the ball. And I think that'll be the big question mark for Texas. I think there's no doubt that Arch is going to be able to sling for 380 and 4 touchdowns against most defenses, but it's going to be those big games. Just Texas have that in them. And that'll be a big question that hopefully we can answer between now and the start of the season. We got a lot of time to figure that one out. You kind of alluded to this team, but I'll jump down to number 2, Ohio State, as the second best wide receiver room, according to Brad Crawford. They come back with Jeremiah Smith, year 3. I know it feels like he should be in the NFL already, but they bring back Jeremiah Smith, and then true freshman 5-star Chris Henry Jr., and then former 5-star Brandon Inniss, and then 2 transfers, Kyle Parker from LSU and Devin McCowan from UTSA. I like this room a lot. I think this is if I were to make my list of top 10 rooms, I like to see 5 deep minimum. Just wide receivers, it's a fickle position. You never know when guys are going to get hurt. If teams have 2 really good corners and a good safety, you might need a 4th receiver to step up and be the guy that makes a difference. You never know who's going to need to step up in which moment. And like I said, with injuries, that really matters. This is a really deep room. This is 5 guys that we have Jeremiah, other than Chris Henry, this is 4 guys that have played a lot of college football, guys who have played in big moments, guys who have played on good teams, guys with production. Chris Henry will be the one guy that will be new to this, but he's 6'4", 6'5", freshman receiver. I think he'll be just fine at Ohio State. It will be interesting. I think Jeremiah Smith does obviously carry this room. That's not disrespect to anyone else. He would carry any wide receiver room. But I do wonder, Chris Henry Jr. is a true freshman. What are we going to get out of him? Brandon Inniss, it was a former 5-star, but he hasn't played a lot in his handful of years at Ohio State. Is there a reason why? Or, why have guys that are younger than him stepped over him so quickly? And then whenever you get 2 transfers, obviously you hope the fit works, but you still have to bank on a fit. So my one fear with Ohio State would be you really return one true Buckeye, and then outside of that are banking on transfers panning out or players without a lot of experience making that next step. But if there's anyone that can do it, it's the Ohio State wide receiver.
I mean, they did lose their wide receiver coach to USF.
But yeah, Brian Hartline
I think
now at USF.
I feel like they're have enough talent to overcome that. Or is it collectively as good a wide receiver room as Texas? As I'm surprised they're number 2. But I think it's because Jeremiah Smith, if you were just creating a weighted average of all the rooms, Ohio State's number 2 because Jeremiah Smith is past the top level you could score him at, right? Texas, everyone's probably at an 85 or an 80. And Ohio State, you could tell me everyone's at an 80 or 75, but Jeremiah Smith's at 102, and it just brings them up. So there's a reason they're up there, and I can't really say I have much of a problem with that. I'm surprised at number 3, and I'm gonna jump into that real quick. Number 3 on this list was Clemson, and they have Bryant Wesco Jr., who's awesome. They have TJ Moore, Name Burrows, who's going to be pretty solid. They have a new OC who, with Lincoln Riley's brother Garrett Riley, the last couple of years, they've been up and down. They look like everything clicked 2 years ago. One of the reasons you and I picked them to win the national title this past year was because, all right, Kate Klubnik, Garrett Riley, everything seems like it's coming together. Let's see how they are, but we think they're going to be really good. And then everything fell apart. I'm curious about this because they have a new OC. They have a new quarterback. They have some returning players, but we mentioned it a bunch this year. This past year, they were so senior laden, they're returning so much. I don't know how much of a difference this room will make, and I don't know if I agree with them being at 3.
You bring up a bunch of great points because on paper, if you look at just NFL draft type, Bryant Wesco Jr. and TJ Moore are 2 guys that NFL scouts think can be first-round picks if they pan out this next year. And then, Naeem Burrows and Tyler Brown were 2 high recruits that showed a lot of flash. And they had this exact room. And this is all homegrown, by the way. This is the one completely homegrown wide receiver room on this list. Only a couple teams have one. We'll talk about here shortly. They had this exact room last season, plus Antonio Williams, who's going to be a high draft pick this year. Plus, as you said, Cade Klubnik, who was a former 5-star and was supposed to be a high pick, and it did not work out whatsoever. So it is interesting. I think this room has a high ceiling. Chris Vizinya's been in the program a little bit. He's going to be the quarterback next season. These wide receivers have been in the program. They certainly should have chemistry. They should know the offense. They should know the program. I think that because of that, they have a really high ceiling, but we saw a terrible floor last season, and they lost their best receiver from this room. So what does that, I'm with you. I think there's so much variability here for a team that just wasn't great last season to put them at number 3, especially I think number 4 and number 5 and number 6 and number 7 all produce scarier rooms, in my opinion. I'll go through them a little quickly here because I know I'm taking a while. Number 4 is the Oregon Ducks with Dakorien Moore, Evan Stewart, Jeremiah McClellan, and then transfer Iverson Hooks from UAB, and then true freshman 5-star Jalen Lott, and then he'll be a true freshman, former 5-star Gatlin Blair, but I think he's 20 years old now. He was on a mission for the last 2 seasons, so he'll be back with Oregon football, or not back, but officially with Oregon football this season. This is probably the deepest room in the country. This is my quick note here. They have 6+ players that were all high recruits or high in transfer portal. All these guys have speed, ability to go up and get a football. I don't think they don't have that Jeremiah Smith, Cam Coleman type top receiver, but they do give you 6 pretty dang good wide receivers with even more depth that I didn't mention here. So this is probably my deepest room. I think 4 is a good note for them. They don't have that elite wide receiver one quite yet that we've seen, but they do have pretty insane depth. I'll pause with the Ducks and give you a chance. I know you might want to share a word or two.
How many of those guys by week 4 can you not tell me they are elite? They just need to take the next step. Like Evan Stewart, he was that last year if he didn't have a torn meniscus all year. Dakorien Moore, like he was true freshman 5-star, made a ton of plays last season. But how? Like I think just as likely as you were saying, like I know you're not saying they're not good. I know you're not saying that. But I think by week 3, we're likely to be like, man, Dakorien looks like a monster. And all of a sudden, if we were to re-rank this, I think Oregon has, and no bias here, Oregon has a good chance to be ranked number 1 in this. Like if you look at Dan Lanning, obviously he recruits stars and talent, but Gatlin Bears, like he was a 5-star out of high school 2 years ago. During his first year, I don't know what to necessarily expect from him. What I do know what to expect from him if he does play is he has track speed. The dude's just fast. And as long as he's kept in shape while he's been on his mission, I expect him to be able to, like, if Evan Stewart might not be in your like starting, like might not be the starting for you right away, you have a really good wide receiver room. Iverson Hooks, I'm curious to see how he's going to fit in. Is he going to I'm curious how is he going to be the name that we're talking about that this time next year about like what a big impact did he have, or was he going to be more of a that was a good depth piece? Like is he going to be a Tez Johnson, or was he going to be a good depth piece? That's a lot to sort out there. But I think my biggest takeaway on Oregon is they're probably fine at 4. I probably would have put them at 3, but they're the team most likely by week 3 to look up and be like, nah, they have the best room in the country.
Yeah, in terms of just quality depth, I think it's hard to put them any lower than 4. And then, yeah, they have the players that have the ceiling to be a top 3 receiver in the country. Evan Stewart can you stay healthy? Because whenever he plays, he shows it, but he just hasn't stayed healthy in years. Dakorien Moore got hurt last season, and he was great last year, but it was also against the lackluster competition. And then we didn't really get to see it. We didn't really get to see him against the top competition because he was hurt. Jeremiah McClellan just started to come into his own towards the end of the season. So like I said, it's a deep team with a high ceiling, but I think it's fair to put them back a little bit at this point in time, just until they get a Cam Coleman or Jeremiah Smith, because those guys are just a different level, and they've been playing at it for a little while. Moving on to number 5, speaking of a guy, Yes, go for it.
One hot take: Jeremiah McClellan will lead the team in will lead Oregon in yards and catches next season. I think he's extremely. I think he's just extremely underrated. I think the way people should look at Jeremiah McClellan for Oregon is remind me the wide receiver 2 for Ohio State last year, not Carnell Tate, the guy the year before. He's on the Bucks now. He's on the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Yeah, he feels more, and they might play slightly different style receivers, whatever positions. He feels like the Emeka Egbuka to Dakorien Moore is Jeremiah Smith to me. Like, Dakorien Moore might make the big highlight plays, but Jeremiah McClellan will be that 3rd and 7 guy that just needs that will hold on to it, maybe break free, score a touchdown, or at least get the team moving.
I will gladly take any Emeka Egbuka comps on my team. Moving on to number 5. Speaking of that 1A wide receivers, Malachi Toney in Miami sitting here. I love Malachi Toney. I think the whole nation should at this point. I think he really proved himself as a true freshman last season. And he's one of those guys that just gets better the bigger the game, which is just, that's a game changing. He played great in the national championship. And then obviously we know they bring in Darian Mensah. They also bring in Darian Mensah's leading receiver and teammate, Cooper Barkett from Duke as well. So yes, it's a transfer, but at least you get the connection. So it doesn't feel like it's a new player. And then South Carolina transfer Vendrivius Jacobs. I have the note here. Interesting team, interesting room. I really love the top 2, and I love Darian Mensah with them. But after that, I don't really know what this room has to offer. But also knowing Mario Cristobal in Miami, we know the focus is going to be on the ground and in the trenches. How does Darian Mensah fit into that offense? Because he's a guy that likes to air it out and is used to it. And it's a team that doesn't usually use a lot of wide receiver depth. But at the same time, like I was saying earlier, when you want to win a national championship, you do need depth at wide receiver and the ability to have not just 1 or 2 guys be able to beat somebody, but to have 3 or 4. Because once you start playing in those big time playoff games, sometimes you need one more playmaker to be the difference, because your wide receiver 3 is that much better than their 3rd corner. And I don't know if Miami has that edge at the moment, but we shall see. Again, this is months away here.
Not to spoil the rest of the list, because we probably should just go through it quicker now, but I promise this take will have something to do with Miami. Indiana's a 6 with Charlie Becker, Nick Marsh. Texas A&M has Mario Craver, Isaiah Horton, Ashton Bethel Roman, and Terry Bussey. Oklahoma, Isaiah Satania, who we love. Parker Livingston transferred over from Texas. Number 9 is Florida State. Their OC just retired, but they have Deuce Robinson and some guys that we don't know very well. Number 10, Jordan Faison and Jaden Greathouse at Notre Dame. My point in saying some of those guys and some of those teams is I think you're right about Miami, like about how good Malachi Toney is. And this isn't me being a hater. I'm just wondering, why is Notre Dame all the way down at 10? Texas A&M, who had a very good wide receiver room and is returning 50% of that, 50% of their wide receiver stars at 7. Why is Indiana, who Nick Marsh, his only fault is that he was on a bad MSU team last year, but we know how good he is. Charlie Becker, anyone watched that national championship game and doesn't know how good Charlie Becker is, you might be blind. Like, how are these the 6 through 10 teams? And Clemson, I'm sorry, Clemson, you have really good potential first round picks, but it's a lot of it feels like all talk. I don't know. I guess I'm biting on this being a ranking and I'm biting on the bait. Like Texas,
Yeah,
I have arguments for Texas to not be number 1. I have arguments for Texas to be number 1. I have arguments for Ohio State to be lower. I have arguments for Oregon to be higher. But like after that, I get it. It's a wash of everyone's good. It just depends on who has a better season, who's healthier, who has a better, easier schedule, whatnot. I just wonder, like Charlie Becker, Nick Marsh at 6, that feels criminal to me.
I agree. That's a lethal combination. And then Shaz Preston, the transfer from Tulane, he's no slouch. He had a big year at Tulane last year. I can't remember where he came from prior to Tulane, but he was like on a good Power 4 school, wanted a little more playing time, came to Tulane, balled out last season, one of their better receivers, and had some big games in big moments for them. And he's going to be the wide receiver 3. And as I was mentioning with Miami, to your point, in a big game where Miami needs their wide receiver 3 to step up and beat somebody's third corner, I'm not sure Miami has that in the way that Indiana does. The fact that as a team, you have to throw your third corner on one of Shaz Preston, Nick Marsh, or Charlie Becker, that's 3 guys that'll beat any of your third corners. Texas A&M, I have this note. I think Texas A&M is my number 1 wide receiver room in the country. Mario Craver was insanely good last season. And yes, they lose Casey Concepcion, but they bring in Isaiah Horton, who a lot of people coming into last season thought that the Alabama wide receiver room was going to be the Ryan Williams show featuring Jeremy Bernard. It kind of turned into the Isaiah Horton show featuring Jeremy Bernard. Isaiah Horton was just that good. He wasn't supposed to be the guy last season, but he was so dominant and so much more dominant than, mind you, Ryan Williams, who used to be in the Jeremiah Smith conversation. He was that good that he took over an Alabama room, became their best receiver, transferred out to go to Texas A&M to kind of join Mario Craver as having another 1-2 punch like they had last year. But then this year they have that depth. So both Ashton, Bethel, Roman, and Terry Bussey last year were true freshmen, high-end 4-stars, like top 10 wide receivers in the country. And they have like decent stats, but mostly just because they got in some trash time games and put up some big numbers. But also, as 18-year-olds, they were pretty productive against subpar teams. If we live in a world where those 2 guys take that step up coming into their second season at Texas A&M, second season with Marcel Reed and with Mike Elko, there's a world where they have like a really good wide receiver 3 and wide receiver 4. And as I was saying, depth and having that talent gap, this might be my number 1 team. And then, yeah, Notre Dame, very underrated, high ceiling team. Florida State, we'll have to see what goes on there. Oklahoma, an interesting one, especially with getting Parker Livingstone to get Texas guy going over to the other side of the rivalry to Oklahoma was kind of funny, especially because the way he exited Texas was a little dramatic.
That was weird.
Did he get wrong? Did he get pushed out? Was he being dramatic? Did go to the rival, though, so I can tell you he is not going to be very welcomed in Austin, Texas the next time that game happens.
No.
I didn't have any honorable mentions. I didn't do the due diligence to make my own top 10 list. I figured if we did that, it would be mostly this. But kind of fun to talk names and outputs for the 2026 season. Do you have any lasting remarks, teams that didn't get mentioned that you want to shout out?
No, because I think it's, all due respect to you and our listeners, I think it's way too early in the off season for me to have a list of teams. But yes, I think Jeremiah McClellan, and if Jeremiah McClellan becomes who I think he is, if Evan Stewart is pretty healthy, I think Oregon's wide receiver room is going to be number 1 by the end of the year. Even if they don't have a Cam Coleman, Jeremiah Smith level monster, I think Dakorien Moore is going to be pretty damn close to that, like if not closer. That I'm curious for everyone listening, like, what do you make of the list? If you want to just go look at the list itself on CBS.com, there's a top 10 list of these wide receiver rooms that we just talked about. Let us know your thoughts. Obviously, everyone wants their teams to be in there, but some of it made sense to me. Some of it didn't. Everyone knows how you and I feel about rankings in general, especially in February or in March of the off season. All right. Other topics for now. Here's one housekeeping. Jason and I might be starting a Flag for Discussion book club. We're on 1 book right now. I'm already done, but I kind of cheated by listening to the audiobook. If you are interested, let us know. We'll start talking about it at the end of the shows.
We could do a little like 10-minute book club release if we get people joining us on it.
Yeah. Are you a audiobooks are cheating guy, or are you a doesn't matter as long as you consumed it? You can be honest.
I tend to read my literature. I'm not an anti-audiobook. I just don't find myself like, if I'm listening to something, it's either music, I'm a big music person, or a podcast. So, and I don't have long drives. I don't even own a car. So I don't I'm usually going on a walk, in which case I would be listening to music or a podcast, or I'm working out, or if I'm in the office, I'm focusing, so it's probably music. But I'm not anti-audiobook. I just don't find myself in the scenarios. Like, I know you have like commutes to and from work in a car, so it's a little bit easier to tune into an audiobook while you're doing that. Versus like if I'm lifting, I'm probably going music there. So versus an audiobook. But You never know. Maybe I need to try it out. Maybe it'll be better for the palm.
No, I just I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I think, yeah, I listen to audiobooks, but like you said, I have a long drive. I also, the headphones you're seeing me wear right now, I have one of them in probably for 80-90% of my workday. And some of that's to listen to podcasts, some of that's to listen to music, some of that's just so I can just pull out my phone. If there's a video someone sends me, I can listen to it without having to pull my headphones out every time. But I constantly have something in my ear. So that's how I consume books. I also like, it's just like how I take advantage of time. So that's, I've just heard there was a conversation on the radio last week of like, that's just cheating. That's not real reading. I'm like, yeah, I'll give you that. I probably am not the guy. I probably am part of the Gen Z goldfish generation. I can't sit down and read a book for an extended period of time. But if I can consume the content somehow, I'll take it as a win for me.
I think it's better than not consuming literature. I think reading is, we don't need to get into the philosophy. Reading is a great thing for the mind. Listening to an audiobook, it's better than listening to brain rot or whatever. So I think there's space for it. Just doesn't, in terms of like, yeah, just convenience of my life. Audiobooks are just probably less convenient than me reading in bed before I go to sleep or something. Also, like when I travel on planes, I like to just have the book physical feeling of it. I've noticed with reading, to your point with the not to go too much into reading here, but we're at the end of a show, so why not?
Let's do this.
The first 10-15 minutes, my brain is like, oh my God, this is taking forever. You're going so slow. Like, I'm watching that clock. It's the longest 10 minutes. But there's always like that 10-15 minute mark. You finally just naturally forget about that. And then you finally get kind of engrossed into your reading, especially when you're through the first part. The starting a book is by far the hardest. And once you kind of get to the meat, especially that second half of a book, audiobooks I know are the same. It's so, you just totally lose track of time. There's been, then you start flipping through pages and it's great. But yeah, those first 10 minutes, maybe it's my cooked attention span, but those first 10 minutes, I'm like, oh man, I used to like reading. I don't know if I can do it anymore. But you just got to get over it.
I'll tell you this, the book that I just finished that you're reading right now, I don't think I would have finished it if I read it. And that's just a me problem, but it just started out a little slow, not slow and boring and slow in terms of like, I was so confused how it started out. I didn't know what was going on, but it did help that someone was speaking it to me and like making sound effects and whatnot, because I'm the brain rotted Gen Z personality that I need stuff like that to keep me interested. But no, honestly, by the middle of the book, by like, I don't know, 5 chapters even, I found myself like looking forward to my long ass drives home, because I was like, all right, it's like 2 hours of like the only stop I have from listening to the book is talking to my fiance when she calls me, like that. And that's lovely, obviously, but it's like 2 hours of uninterrupted reading time, or quote unquote. Okay, so we've covered now 3 of the 6 random phone topics. I don't know how many more of these I want to go into. Donald Trump is inviting a series of college football people and random people to the White House to have a roundtable on the future of college football. These people include all the Power 4 conference commissioners: Tony Petitti, Greg Sankey, Brett Yormark, Jim Phillips, Notre Dame AD Pete Bavacca, the old Notre Dame AD Jack Swarbrick. Urban Meyer is also invited. The Tennessee Chancellor is invited. ADs from Wake Forest, Indiana, Iowa State, Oklahoma are invited. Bryson DeChambeau is invited. Tiger Woods is invited. Adam Silver, former Secretary of State Condoleezza Rice is invited. Ron DeSantis, the Florida governor, is invited. And the New York Yankees president, Randy Levine, is a vice chair. Obviously, Nick Saban, Tim Tebow, Cody Campbell. What is like the first topic they talk about? I doubt it's college football, right? All these very successful, influential people. But what is the first thing they talk about? Like whose jet they flew?
I don't know if I want to provide any commentary on this, because I don't know if I have any appropriate things to say. Yeah, their first topic will probably be very interesting. I can't imagine it's going to be a meeting of the minds in terms of like getting this college. There's so many non-college football, like I'm trying to keep politics out of this. I don't think that this is a productive way to have a college football meeting, in the sense that let's bring way too many people in. So now we've got like 18 voices that would have to be heard. And half of them don't know anything about college football or like have the same amount of perspective and value to the sport that you and I do. In which case, like, why are they in the room with these people? And then like people like Urban Meyer there. Well, Urban Meyer has been caught cheating in numerous different facets throughout his career. So do we really trust what he thinks? It's very interesting. But I'll say this, I'll give it some positivity. If it leads to a fixed college football schedule or stopping to expand the college football playoff, then hell yeah, let's go. There's my take on that.
I'll try to look at it positively too. I'm glad someone's having the conversation. And we have a topic for next week's show of the NCAA actually having these conversations about what they could do, what changes they could bring in the transfer portal window and all that stuff. That was slated for today's show, but we talked too long. But I'm just glad someone's having the conversation. So if you want to go have McDonald's at the White House on the taxpayer dime, I guess, sure. Someone go talk about college football and see if we can. I find it funny that I forget what his name is. The senator, former Auburn coach. I'm finding it funny he's not invited. He literally was a coach in college football, and now he's a Republican senator. But you know, I guess.
Oh, interesting. Yeah, I feel like that would have been he would have been a fun choice. Yeah, I'm with you. If this means we get actions fixed that are for the people, then let's do it. I'll take it. But if it's just going to be nonsense that is nonsense, then whatever.
Alrighty. So on that note, I will get to the other two phone topics on the next week's show. Happy March 2nd, everybody. Happy March. Thank you for tuning in. Make sure you're following us on YouTube at Flag for Discussion spelled out, Apple Podcasts, Spotify, wherever you get your podcasts at Flag for Discussion spelled out. We're on Twitter at F4Discussion and on TikTok at Flag 4 Discussion. Let us know. Would you rather go bald or would you rather have gray hair? We had this conversation before the show. We are very curious what everyone else thinks because I think Jason and I came to a consensus. Does consensus work with two people or agreement? We came to an agreement.
It's of the population of you and I, it's a consensus, yes.
Yes. All right. From myself, Farbode Merkazi, my lovely partner, Jay Satfield. This has been lovely. This has been fun. Thank you so much for tuning in. This has been Flag for Discussion.